Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We are about to do the retaping of Tod Goldberg talking with us and a performance of his story, Walls, by David Campfield. First, I'm Dorothy Rice. I'm the co-director of Stories on Stage Sacramento, trying to get the glare out of my glasses.
An age-old problem since the time of Shakespeare.
Yes, I think so. My husband saw the first recording and said, you know, you should really do something about the glare in your glasses. Like, thanks, I appreciate that.
Thanks for telling me I should change nature.
Anyway, enough about me. I am co-director with Shelley Blanton Stroud, who is in the background, Tod Goldberg, the author that we'll be featuring today, and David, our performer, and Jessica Lasky, our casting director, who will be introducing David to us when the time comes. First off, I wanted to just say a few words about Tod and then ask him a few questions. And then I'll turn it over to Jessica and David to begin the performance. Tod.
Yes, ma'am. I'm here. I'm ready.
Good. So Tod is a wonderful person, a friend, an amazing author, and a person with a very big heart, who is also very funny, which is something I admire. But more specifically, he's a New York Times national and international best-selling author of over a dozen books now, which is incredible, in a diversity of genres, from crime fiction to, I hate the term, but I guess literary fiction and nonfiction, essays, anthologized many times, including the story we're going to hear today, right?
Correct.
That's featured in anthologies. What else can I say about his writing? I don't know. Is the term genre fluid offensive?
No, I mean, it's on my bathroom, so the poets can pee wherever they want when they come to my house. No, I mean, I think, so I grew up in a family of writers. My mom was a writer. My dad was in TV news. My brother is an author. My sisters write books together. And the thing that I've been taught my entire life is to have a lot of ways into a story, so being able to tell a story in a lot of different ways allows you to always have access to the art that you do well. And so sometimes the thing I want to write is broadly literary fiction. Sometimes the thing I want to write is crime fiction. Sometimes I just want to write an essay or an op-ed. The only thing I really don't write is poetry, because I think I just giggle the entire time, and then I'd probably start to rhyme, and no one wants any of that. Or
it might be great though.
Be a haiku situation. No one wants a haiku anymore. But I think of writing as a craft, and as a craftsman, I try to be fluent in a lot of the different models of it.
Yeah, and you are. I mean, I would say you're a masterful storyteller in all the different genres.
Thank you.
I view nonfiction as clearly a storytelling genre, as well as I believe you do. More of your accolades, or accolades, however you pronounce that.
Bona fides.
Bona fides.
Bona fides. Bona fides.
Tod also.
Awards and recognition.
I'm sure you've had plenty.
Knighthoods.
Yeah, I don't know those, but you do co-host 2 podcasts.
I do.
I almost said Todcasts.
Brilliant.
Literary and one there more locally, right, called Open Book.
Correct.
Which is pretty cool to keep the local folks tuned into literature. Tod also somehow manages to direct the UC Riverside's low residency MFA in creative writing and writing for the performing arts, which is an amazing program from which I graduated and had the pleasure to work with Tod while I was there. Did I miss anything important, Tod?
Well, there were the 10 years I was a professional mime, but I don't talk about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see. It's a joke.
Anyone?
I get it.
Anyone?
I get it.
I haven't left my home, Dorothy, in 33 days. So I'm starting to
some mime poetry would be really cool.
Yeah, I would. I'm beginning to disassociate a little bit, just a little bit.
Had you noticed? So am I.
No, I think you accurately have portrayed my life. Writer, author, critic, philanthropist, supermodel.
You name it. Yeah.
I'm sort of like Iron Man, but I don't like to fly.
So given that, we're really grateful, thrilled to have you.
Happy to be here.
My first actual question is, one thing that I really admire about you is your capacity for being yourself in an unostentatious way on social media. And I mention this because during this time of the pandemic and social isolation and all of these things, it seems like people, writers in particular, are going one of two ways. They're either embracing the medium and staying with us, or they're, I think, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate and I don't know what, and receding from view.
Right.
And so I wondered what thoughts or perspective you have on, how it works for you and advice you might have for others who are struggling.
Well, I'm an extrovert. I think that's become clear in the last 9 minutes. But I'm also aware that I have a unique responsibility as a nominal public figure and as a writer. And I find this to be true in general, like, when I write op-eds about political or social inequities in the world, where I feel like I'm out there and I'm talking because someone else is scared to speak. I feel like that's part of the job of for lack of a better term, a literary public figure. Now, so my social media during this vast global pandemic sometimes reflects my anger, my rage, my dissatisfaction, that sort of thing with the general state of the world. But also, I'm aware that there are fans of mine that are out there that have come to me for entertainment for 20 years, and that I can put a smile on their face or make them giggle about something, or we can have a conversation, or I can shoot a little video and send it to them about something that will surprise them. I'm more than happy to do it because I think I'm not here without those people. I'm not there without these fans that go out and buy my books and literally are responsible for the roof above my head. That being said, the other thing that social media has been, I think, really great for during this time is I miss my friends and my family desperately. And I love being able to interact with them at any given time, and the ability to have funny and stupid conversations about meaningless things really takes your mind off of whatever your troubles might be. And so I think the best of social media has actually come out during this time because people are really showing a profound level of empathy towards one another on there, combined with the arrival of crazy gun-toting Nazis on the internet as well, which are always there. And I don't, unfortunately, have to look too far for them because they send me notes. But I am what you see, and I'm going to go out there. I'm going to talk, and I'm not going to be quiet, and I'm going to tell dumb jokes, and I'm going to talk to my friends. And you have to try to make the best of this world during the time that you live in it, irrespective of whether or not you get to leave your house inside of that time. Yeah. So I'm just trying to be sane.
Yeah. And yourself.
And myself in the same process.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's helpful. The reminder that, among other things, a writer is a communicator, and connecting with people. And as you say, you have people you've connected with, and you're staying connected with them, and I'm sure they're grateful for that.
Yeah, and the other side of it too is, I've got 100 graduate students that are in my charge, and I've got 15 faculty that work for me, and I don't have the luxury of falling apart. In a time of chaos, people need something firm beneath their feet, something that's dependable and reliable. And I need to be that for my students. I need to be that for the professors who work for me. And I put a real premium on on that. I'll fall apart on June 16th. But while school's in session, I have a job to do, and it's to make these students feel safe and protected and capable of making art during this troubled time. And we need these people. We need these writers. They're going to be the people who chronicle what we're going through. They're our memory, and I need to provide them the contours of safety in any way that I can.
Right. And this is the first time, right, in the history of the MFA program you direct, that you won't be able to have in-person residency.
Yes, don't say it. Don't say it.
I assume that's what you meant by June 16th. No.
Are we still on camera? Yeah, that's what I meant.
But, it can be cut at any time, at any point. You just have to ask. But yeah, I mean, that's obviously...
Yeah, so the MFA program that I teach, that Dorothy is a graduate of, is online, but then we have 2 10-day residencies twice a year, 10 days in June and 10 days in December. And where I live in Palm Springs, Riverside County has closed the physical schools through June 19th and also all of the hotels. So it sort of became a moot proposition. We had to cancel our in-person residency. But we're still going to do cool things for the students and all of that. But there's a real value in sitting across from someone and talking about your hopes and fears and dreams and not doing it digitally. And I really miss that. And I miss seeing my friends, and I miss seeing the people that I work with. And I miss being able to sit down with a student and have coffee and talk about nothing also. These are the challenges that social beings run into when there's a vast global pandemic.
Yeah, words we never knew we'd be saying.
Yeah. Just the other night, I was getting into bed. I promise this won't take a strange turn. I was getting into bed, and my wife was already there, and I had a relatively normal day in the scope of this thing. And I just screamed, "We're living in a vast global pandemic!" It was all I could say. Like, not good night, but like, just FYI, this is weird.
Yeah. It is weird.
But I'm highly lucky. I have a job, I have money, I have a house. And my larger concerns are for the people that have none of those things.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Back on the writing. So the story we're going to hear today, Walls, is part of a collection. This one.
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah, which I've read a couple times. Not just to be a suck-up student, but that was probably the first time that I read it. One of the stories that impressed me so much when I first read it, and I think I must have talked to you about it, like, aren't you going to do something like more with this, was Mitzvah. Mm-hmm. The story about a Las Vegas rabbi named David Cohen, who isn't what he appears to be, and was somebody named Sal Cupertine in another life. And I wanted to ask you, particularly as our book club read for the month is going to be Gangsterland, one of your best-selling novels.
Going right there.
Yeah. Yes, behind you. And I would love to raise mine, but my sister won't give it back. I'll have to buy another one. But you had written in mine, so that pisses me off. But I wanted to ask you, like, what was the inspiration for Sal? And then how did it grow from there to where you are now with multiple novels?
Yeah, so I had been asked by a publisher to write a short story, a noir short story, for an anthology called Las Vegas Noir. It's part of the City Noir series that Akashic Books puts out. In fact, I just wrote another one for the Palm Springs Noir that's going to come out next year. And so I had lived in Las Vegas for 2 years in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And so I was assigned the neighborhood that I had lived in, which is Summerlin. And Summerlin in Las Vegas is basically just a giant gated community with a Baja Fresh and a Starbucks in every corner. And then the smell of Pottery Barn candles wafts through every doorway as you drive by. So as is typical in these situations, I was given this assignment and given money, and then I didn't have anything to write about. And I was here in the desert where I live, and I had to go pick someone up at the airport. And by the airport in Palm Springs is a very old Native American cemetery. and I was stopped at a red light, and I was having this existential crisis about what my short story was going to be that I was going to write. I turned and I looked at this old cemetery that I'd never seen anyone in or walking out of ever. And I saw someone walk out of the cemetery, and I thought, boy, if you really wanted to get away with murder, you'd kill someone and bury them in an old cemetery. And then I was like, wait a minute. And by the conclusion of the red light, I had this idea of a cemetery run by the mafia connected to a church or a synagogue. And that sort of thought became the short story Mitzvah, which is about the last day on the job of Rabbi David Cohen, who's actually a mafia hitman named Sal Cupertine. And so after I wrote that short story in 2009, I knew that there was more to tell. And so I began working on Gangsterland, which is that book right there, which is the actual story of how Sal Cupertine became the Rabbi David Cohen. And then I wrote Gangster Nation, that one right there, which is the sequel and continues the story. There's a book called The Low Desert that's going to come out in 2021, which is a collection of short stories that is all based on many of the same characters. And then there'll be another novel. The title was going to be called Death of a Gangster, but then Amazon bought the rights of the books to turn into a TV show. So I might not kill any gangsters in the third book. I'm not real sure.
Yeah.
So it's been a long process, but it's basically been the last decade of my life has been devoted to this character of this fake rabbi, but real hitman who, by virtue of the job that he has hiding out as a rabbi, becomes a rabbi. Because if you're going to pretend to be a rabbi for several years, the only way you can do it successfully is to be a rabbi. So fortuitously, that stoplight set me on a really nice path. Yeah. And my own desperation for a story idea really set me on a good path. But it turns out it's the story I've always wanted to write. You know, it's a combination of literary fiction and crime fiction. It touches on the areas that I'm interested in sort of philosophically as well. And then I just get to, you know, have a character who says badass things and kills people, which on the sort of day-to-day basis, kind of my dream job.
Yeah, I don't think I'd heard the stoplight story. That's cool. And the graveyard and the inspiration. But yeah, the whole series, I just reread Gangster Nation. And having read Walls and some of the other stories recently, what you were saying about taking whatever the story is and using all of your tools within it. I mean, I see the same mind or voice behind it. So that's a cool thing. That in a mobster, I feel the heart of Tod Goldberg.
Well, and as you'll hear when David reads the story here in just a second, there are, in fact, you know, there's echoes in Walls of characters that show up in the gangster stories, particularly a character named Cy Cohen who sells Seiko watches, but we'll get to him in just a minute.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty cool. Thank you, Tod.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask what's coming up, and you kind of wound that into your last answer.
Yeah, I've got a book due in 9 days.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is why I look like this.
One last super brief question, maybe. Do you see what we're going through now, the pandemic and all this, weaving into your future writing or influencing it for you personally as a writer?
I don't know. You know, the thing about traumatic events that we all witness is that it's hard to capture them in art in a convincing fashion. You've seen this with books about 9/11, for instance, or short stories about 9/11. Everyone has their own peculiar experience with this thing, whatever this large traumatic experience might be. And so when you try to make something out of it, immediately there's a suspension of disbelief that is hard for the reader or the viewer or whatever to have, because they have their own reality for it. That being said, what I have found is that if I do a little white collar crime, I could do house arrest for 6 months standing on my head. It'd be no problem. None. I'm in it. I could totally do it. But I suspect that there'll be some nonfiction. I have felt the urge to write some op-eds and some editorials, things like that, particularly where I live,
Yeah.
because I see a lot of folks not helping the poorest of the poor while they're having Omaha steaks delivered to their homes and that sort of thing, and that causes me anger. So, I suspect that it will come through eventually, but I did set a story in my new collection in 2020, and I went in and I altered the dates so that it happened before the pandemic, because I don't want the story then to grind to a halt. And, for a crime writer, something like this is actually, there's a lot of grist for the mill here. There's like, I'm seeing the neighbors' homes wide open and thinking I could move a crime family into that 3-story house down the street and they wouldn't come back until next year or whatever. So I see a lot of opportunity, but it's hard to say how a traumatic event shows up in anyone's art. It might just be in subtext more than in story.
Yeah, or years from now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Before I turn it over to Jessica, I forgot something very important, which was we are actually Stories on Stage Sacramento with cookies.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so I forgot to introduce our cookie of the afternoon, which is a homemade snickerdoodle from Sue Stat's kitchen that she delivered at a safe, socially conscious distance, leaving it on my doorstep, a bag for me and a bag for Shelley, and assuring us that they were sanitized and all of that, and they can now be eaten. So
I've got a Thin Mint.
And so wherever you're watching this, grab a cookie, and anything that you eat during this hour does not carry calories. So feel free to eat as many as you want, because there's something about this forum that releases all normal obligations. So have at it. You're dunking?
I'm offering it to these fine people here.
Cool.
No? I'll eat it.
With that, I'll turn it over to Jessica Lasky, our casting director, to introduce our performer.
Great. So yes, it's my pleasure to introduce David Campfield. I'll give you a brief bio, but then I will turn it over to him, because that's what you've been wanting to hear, is to hear him read. So briefly, David started his acting career in Sacramento, and he's appeared in dozens of plays there. I've seen him in many. I've performed in one reading with him there, and he started getting more involved in on-camera projects. So he started working in San Francisco Bay Area on camera, and then in 2014 he moved to the greater LA area, Los Angeles, to do more TV and film. But he always is very glad to return to Sacramento, luckily for us, to perform. And he's been in quite a few shows, actually, locally, including Sense and Sensibility at Sacramento Theater Company, Playwrights Revolution at Capitol Stage, which is actually where we work together, and then the indie film Grunk the Smasher by TFO Productions. I love that title. And I've had the pleasure of watching David over so many years, and he's an incredible performer, as you'll see, but also one of the nicest, hardworking people, which says a lot in the theater community. Somebody who's actually a good person and, and really, really does his work. So I'm very excited to hear him today. So without further ado, here is David reading Walls from, I think we didn't say the title yet, Other Resort Cities.
Yes.
The collection. So I will
say that big. Just
yes. And here's David Campfield.
Walls by Tod Goldberg. We were not consulted. It was the 1970s, and then it was the early 1980s. What would happen was that men would come to the door, smelling of brute or smelling of cigarettes in the fine leather interior of their Gran Torinos or TR7s, and they would say, "I'm here to pick up Sally. Is this the right house?" We'd say, "Yeah, come on in. She's getting dressed." Or we'd say, "Do you mean mommy?" Or, and this was rare, but it happened because we were young and angry, and when your parents have divorced and all you have to show for it is a mother who has suddenly decided that she'd like to fuck as many men as possible, and a father who turns out was gay, but you wouldn't know that until long after he was dead, and you found out through the photos and letters, but who at the time was dating a woman named Miss Lisa who hosted Romper Room on Channel 2, we'd say, Are you our new daddy? It was cruel, but we were smart, and we were sad, and we had agendas. We kept a list. We updated it nightly. We remember you. That's what this is about. We remember you. We thought you'd stay. We thought on the day before the last night, when you sat us down and said that you'd stay, but that our mother was crazy, was ruining your life, was ruining our lives too, and that if you had legal rights, why you'd just take us out of this house. You told us you'd wait until our mother went to work and you'd back up a big truck and we'd all just move our stuff into it. We'd take the 2 dogs, Sam and Roxanne, and we'd pull up the yellow shag carpet in the family room, the hundreds of Star Wars action figures, the posters of Peter Frampton, the posters of Rick Springfield, the posters of Heather Thomas, the Easy Bake Oven, the Risk Board, the photo albums from when we still had the beach house, back when Mom still looked young, still had that Jackie O thing going for her. Dad used to be in those photos too, but he's gone, cut out, just a shoulder or a foot or a brim of a hat, just barely visible in a jagged corner. You were a cop. We remember that. But then you quit your job after you saw a guy get his head blown off. Blam, you said. Blam, and then there was nothing but a stump. You said that's what made you quit your job and become a steel worker. And then you lost that job because people had a way of dying around you. People had a way of being near you and then not being near you. They said you didn't follow protocol, that you were responsible for an industrial accident. And so you lived in our house for a little while. And that was good. We felt so calm. We felt normal. We felt the wall shake when you had sex with our mother, but that was okay. And we felt the wall shake when you'd climb into her shower and sob, begging your fists against the tile, probably unaware that her bathroom backed up to one of our bedrooms. We remember you. We remember Doug Loomis. He called accidentally, looking for someone else. But Mom liked his voice, told him she thought he sounded very interesting, wondered if he might like to buy her a drink the next time he was in town. She called him wrong number, and she told us he had a boat and that he really wanted to take us all out on it, that we'd sail to Catalina or Hawaii or Peru, and that he loved all of us kids. Doug Loomis was bald. Doug Loomis showed up in our kitchen one Sunday morning and asked us to make him some coffee. Asked us to get him the newspaper. Asked us if we could quiet the fuck down. Mom wanted to know a few days later what we'd done to wrong number, because he no longer called, not even by accident. You once took us to a park and told us to forget who our parents were. You told us to pretend that you were our father, and that the woman who'd just thrown a platter of frozen meat at us was just a burglar. We remember Cy Cohen. Cy Cohen sold Seiko watches. In the morning, he'd walk outside in one of our father's old bathrobes, and he'd read the paper standing up on the driveway. Cy Cohen drove an Alfa Romeo. Cy Cohen used to scream his own name at night. It sounded like this. Oh, fuck, yes, Cy! Cy Cohen lasted a few weeks, actually, long enough to enjoy Thanksgiving in our home. He gave us all Seiko watches. He left them on doilies next to our plates. They were thick and silver. They glowed in the dark. They pulled our wrists down. They kept imperfect time. Mom told us that Cy cared very deeply for us, would probably want to adopt us, that he loved us very much. We wrote excessively long thank you notes to Cy for the watches. And a week after Cy Cohen stopped his eponymous joy, he showed up at the house and demanded all of our watches back. You told us we'd be 18 one day. You told us to hold on to that. We remember Mark Barton. Mark had 3 kids, all boys, and they were big, scary fucks. They went to school with us. They used to beat the shit out of us. They once tied us to the bike racks in front of Castle Rock Elementary and threw walnuts at our genitals. They said things like, "We're going to make your pussies bleed." Mark Barton owned a chain of hardware stores. He wore golf shirts with a penguin logo. He had silver hair that he kept cut short like he was in the military. Mark Barton starred in his own commercials where he'd say, "Hi kids, I'm Mark Barton. Go get your parents and tell them I'm on TV and I want to make a deal with them." Mom met Mark Barton when she was thinking about becoming a realtor. She went to some community mixer where he was a Toastmaster. She didn't come home for 2 days, just left a message on the recorded call that said she'd met someone, that we should eat the Swanson chicken TV dinners in the freezer, that we should ask Stephanie Hauser's mom to drive us to school. The 3 Barton boys cornered us at school and told us that our mother sounded like a malfunctioning backhoe when she was getting fucked, that she made shitty pancakes, and that if we weren't careful, they'd make our pussies bleed. Your sister died when you were living in our house. We went to the funeral even though we didn't know her. It was December, just a few days before Christmas, and the service was held out in Benicia. In the distance, we could see the Navy mothball fleet docked out in the shallow bay. You got up during the service and said that you were sorry that you'd been such a terrible brother to her, that you let her make so many mistakes, that you should have just picked her up in your arms and carried her away and put her in a place where she could get the help she needed, where she wouldn't find a way to meet guys like you, Freddie, you fucking cocksucker. And then you made eye contact with us. We nodded our heads and mouthed that we loved you. We went to Farrell's afterwards and ate hot fudge sundaes. You told us stories about your sister. You told us she lived in regret. You told us her negativity propelled her towards drugs and guys like Freddie, who would rather kick her fucking ass than kiss her on the lips. When Mom said not to use such language in front of us, you said, "You remind me of her a lot, Sally. You really do, and that's not a compliment." We remember Jack Merkin. Jack wore velour. Jack went to Purdue on a basketball scholarship in some nebulous yellowed past, but they didn't stop him from wearing Purdue sweatshirts and Purdue t-shirts and velour pullover V-neck sweaters with a tiny Purdue logo stitched over the chest. Jack Merkin owned a limo service and said he had a house up in Tahoe. Every time he came to pick up Mom, a long black limo would pull up in front of the house. "Jack's here," we'd say, watching him through the living room window, his shadow barely visible as he slid through the opening between the front seat and the back seat so he could get out through the back passenger door. The neighbors would come out onto their front porches to see who was in the limo, because this was in the 1970s and not just anyone could get a limo unless you had $75 to spend on the evening. We got to drive in the limo once. It was raining and we pounded on the master bedroom door to let Mom know we needed a ride to school, that all of us would be drenched if we walked, that there was lightning that might kill us. Jack came to the door. "Your mom says ask the neighbors for a ride," Jack said. "Well, why don't I just take you?" We climbed into the back of the limo and it was nothing like we imagined. The seats were once crushed red velvet, but now they were crusted and hard, black electrical tape keeping them together in places. It smelled of perfume and cigars and something like vinegar but more pungent. We found a bra on the floor. We found a high-heeled shoe. We found a Marlboro butts in the ashtray. We found handprints on the back window. We found Jack staring at us through the dividing window at the stop sign on the corner of our street. It looked like he wanted to cry, or he wanted to cough, or he wanted this moment in his life to end, because he just kept staring at us before finally saying, "I'm sorry, you guys should just walk." You took us for lobster on the day your unemployment ran out. We remembered Dan Kern. Dan was our stepfather for 6 months. Dan was a lawyer. Dan spoke German fluently. Dan wore bikini underwear long before it was fashionable. Dan had 3 children from a previous marriage, though all of them were adopted: Stephen, Bonnie, and Lyle. They came to live with us on the weekends, sharing our rooms and eating our Pop-Tarts and changing the TV from reruns of The Brady Bunch to reruns of Get Smart without even asking. Dan didn't particularly care for the fact that we didn't call him Dad. He asked us if we loved him. We said no. He asked why not. We told him we didn't even know him. Mom told us he was going to adopt us, and we were going to change our last names, and that Dan was going to get a full custody of his kids, and we'd all live together in a big house in Pacific Heights. Then, Stephen beat up his grandma with a broomstick and told everyone that Johnny Carson told him to do it. Then Bonnie brought a Ouija board to our house and started taking her top off around us, which caused problems because we weren't related and we were young, and we knew from the shaking wall that there was possibility in all this, that we could all scream our names and no one would know what it meant but us. Then Lyle showed up at homecoming dressed as a woman, and we found out that he had the machinery to be both, and that he'd made a choice because he was 16 and he was now going to be Linda. One day, shortly thereafter, Dan chased us all into the garage. He was wearing his Hawaiian print bikini underwear and was waving around a butcher knife and screamed at us in German. And then he wasn't our stepfather anymore. You showed up at our graduations. We saw you in the back. It had been years, but we recognized you. We looked for you afterward, and since we never found you, we began to think that maybe you weren't really there, or just a mirage, that you were just us wishing you'd reappear. We remember when there was no one left. We remember when the men stopped coming because Mom had become sick, was told she'd be dead in 6 months, though of course she never did die. But by then, we were gone. We came back as adults to care for her, back to our old bedrooms. We slept on our Star Wars sheets. We listened to The Knack and Gordon Lightfoot and Journey and REO Speedwagon and the Thompson Twins and Sean Cassidy and Blondie, and talked about how much those songs used to mean to us. So much that when Mom would scream, "Down or off," we would just turn it up and wait for the rage, wait for her to walk outside and turn off the power, leaving us in the dark, spinning our records on our old Fisher-Price record players, the music just tinny scratches of sound, which was a departure from the yelling that rippled down the hallway. That caused Sam and Roxanne, the dogs, to crap themselves right where they stood. We found Bonnie's Ouija board and tried to contact you there in case you were dead. We stood Mom up in her shower and bathed her, the water glancing off the tile wall and pooling at our feet. And we imagined you standing there alone, hitting that wall, pounding that wall, sobbing. And we reached out to you in our minds in case you stood there still, haunting the shower, your demons buried in the grout along with bits of skin from your knuckles. We put Mom into her bed, and it seemed so much smaller than we imagined it. It was just a bed, 4 corners, sheets, a headboard. We imagined you there beside her. We tried to figure out what drove you there in the first place. How old were you? 35? 40? our age now. Now we have our own beds, we have our own master bedrooms, and yet we think of you still, standing here saying goodbye to her in bed, because that's where it happened. You stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, and you said, I just can't do this. How many others, Sally? How many? And she said a number like 5 or 7, or who fucking cares? Just get the fuck out. You know, job, son of a bitch. And you walked down the hallway, and you poked your head into each of our rooms, and you said goodbye. You said sorry, and you said you tried for us, but that there's a limit, and you found yours. And then the stapler hit you in the back, and we looked, and Mom was throwing things from her bedroom at you. And you just kept walking. You even stopped and hugged the dogs. You put your nose in that space between Sam's eyes, and you held her ears, and you whispered something. And you picked up Roxanne, who was a collie, and you hugged her like a child, and she licked your face. A bottle of cologne came sailing down through the air, and it cracked on the wall, and you didn't even move. The hallway still smells of you. Mom would have us shampoo the carpet and scrub the wallpaper, but nothing removed the smell. And here we are, decades in the dust, and we find tiny bits of glass still wedged into the wall. You exist on the internet. We've map-quested your addresses. One day we will fly to you in Florida, and Iowa, and Alaska, and Washington, and we will knock on your door, and when you open it, we will say, do you remember us? And you will say no, and you will say no, and you will say no, but then maybe you will say yes, because it will be you, and not just a man with your name. You'll be older too, because there isn't a way for memory to freeze the body like it freezes trauma in place. Or we will let you be and give you that grace. We will drive by your homes across the country, and we will imagine you inside, and we will wonder if you've known all along that we remember.
Woo! Author, no. Performer.
Well, author two, both of them.
My goodness.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah. That was the second time, and still super powerful. Maybe give David and Tod a chance to talk about it a little bit, how it felt to have your story read by David and how it felt to read Tod's story.
Well, for me, so I'd already heard David drive me to tears once before, so I knew the parts at which I should think about soccer, so that I didn't cry on camera again. But David, you're such a fantastic interpreter of this mostly true but entirely fictional story of mine. And the wonderful thing, and I know I told you this before, but it's true, is that you inhabit all of these men in their peculiarities amazingly well, but you inhabit the man that I was speaking to particularly well. And that's the part that makes it difficult for me to listen to you read a story where I know all the words and not feel like I want to sob into my keyboard. So I appreciate the dedication and the elegance that you gave these old words of mine.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure. I thought they were, if the script is horrible, I couldn't have been able to do that. So thank you for your writing. Yeah, it was, the main drive for me for this was thinking about how this was, how a lot of times when like a parent like takes on a new relationship or so, if there's children involved, they often either become and or feel periphery. And so even though if the people aren't paying so much attention to the children are keenly paying attention to everything happening. And so that, and with that perspective, it shows. I was also able to use from your script how much they paid attention to a lot of the guys that were not, real winners.
Right.
And then in contrast to the one they were addressing. So and as far as, and to use acting terms of speaking of like objectives, like what is it the person trying to do with this script or with whatever they're saying? It's as if this position I took on that was like, this was something like, and the speaker, the child now grown, imploring the person he was addressing to either come back or remember or undo the past and fix it for us or whatever it was. Just so there's something about, I guess, dealing with that, the tragedy from that abandonment that they were still, still feeling, like eventually at the end, how the trauma is frozen in place.
Right.
So,
yeah. And, I think a story like that is hard to write because it can be maudlin, I wrote an essay a few years ago about witnessing a boxer dying in the boxing ring. But it's also just a story of sort of the same messed up childhood that you just read about. But in that essay, I said, I know that comparing my bad childhood to the death of this man are inequalities. But I think recognizing that suffering isn't a competition is an important way to write. If there's something to be gleaned from it. And so when I was writing Walls, the truth of the matter is, so as I said, it's 96% true, which means it's fiction. Is I had pitched the short story to the Los Angeles Times Magazine, and the Los Angeles Times Magazine was expecting this story from me, and I had not written it, and it was due, by the end of the day on Tuesday or whatever. And I've been trying to write the story and trying to write the story and trying to write the story. And I said to my lovely wife, Wendy, I'm having a really hard time writing the story because I want to write this, but I want to write it from the point of view not just of myself, but also of my siblings. I don't typically write their stories because I believe those stories belong to them. But I knew that they had to play a role in this. And my wife, because she's so much smarter than me and is always right, which is her fatal flaw, said, why don't you write it in first person collective in the we voice? And so the story that you read just now, I wrote in 4 hours, and it's exactly as it looked when I wrote it. And I was like, oh my God, I wrote this great story, and it took me 4 hours, Wendy. My God, I should always ask you how to write these stories, and then only take me 4 hours. And she was like, that story took you 25 years that you've been trying to write that story. And I was like, God. Her fatal flaw. She's always right. But the ironic thing is I turned the story into the Los Angeles Times Magazine, and the next morning the Los Angeles Times Magazine folded. So ironically, and the editor, I remember getting the email from the editor saying, add this to the ways life has screwed you over. But it all ended up appearing in another magazine. But I think about the process of writing the story and the emotion and the voice that it's written in is really a reflection both of the looming deadline, the 25 years that I'd taken to not write it, and the wisdom of my wife telling me how to do it, which I think provides urgency to a story that is not, in fact, traumatic in the sense that someone's in a satanic biker gang or something. You know what I mean? It's a domestic story about things a lot of people go through. And so in that way, I hope that it's helpful to people too, to know that the emotions that probably they have felt, that they're not the only person to have felt it, because I know that trauma can feel isolating.
Yeah. Well, I'd say also too, how from your wife's idea to have this in the first person. So I think two things that really help this for the purpose of like a dramatic reading like this one is that one, it's in the first person, so it's more personal, from whoever's reading it. But then also the fact that it's first person addressing the figure that the kids actually do miss. Like for just in the first person, like say if I was as the speaker, if I was talking about all these to like say a therapist, there was this guy I didn't like, this guy I didn't like, and there's one guy I really liked. It wouldn't have been nearly as effective as addressing the one that we remembered most.
Right.
So I thought that was a really good writing choice as well.
Thank you. And I've never used that first person plural voice subsequently. It feels like it only for me belongs to that one story. I can't imagine using it for something else. And in point of fact, I think first person plural is hard to read over a long period of time too. So you see it pretty infrequently. The most famous example, of course, would be A Rose for Emily, the short story Rose for Emily, or The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides, or Then We Came to the End by Joshua Ferris. There's not a lot of them because I think, and this is what you did so well, is that voice requires propulsion of emotion, and hearing you read it, you are working to a pitch, and I so appreciate that. Like, I so appreciate how you modulated your voice depending upon where we were in the story, starting off quiet and sort of a little funny, and then by the end being tragic. It's the voice that I hear in my head, and you are now going to be the voice I hear in my head for all of my post-apocalyptic pandemic dreams.
Okay, well, thank you and sorry.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it was an amazing performance of an amazing story. You mentioned your essay, Tod, that is also amazing about the boxer. Give us the name.
Oh, that essay is called When They Let Them Bleed, and that was in Best American Essays in 2013. But if you go to my website, todgoldberg.com, there's a free version of it right there that you can go read if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not feeling that depressed today. Is there something that could depress me? Oh, Todd's got 6,000 words. That'll depress me.
It's an amazing essay. I encourage anyone who's listening to go to Todd's website and read it. That one makes me cry every time.
It is, in fact, the thing I have written in my life that I am the most proud of.
Well, I would be too. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you guys so much. I think that's it for today's show. We can look forward to a book club meeting on Anita Felicelli's Chimerica on May 6th and Tod Goldberg's Gangsterland on May 20th. I think that's right. And we hope you'll be with us then, Tod, to, answer questions or, share conversation.
If there's one thing that's been proven, if you're talking about me, I will show up.
I love that. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, David. As always, you're wonderful.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Jessica.
Oh, yeah.
Talk.